everyone, my name is Tyler Waters, and today I'll be going over my crude imports and exports dashboard. On my first page, I have my monthly market synopsis that contains trends that are affecting both imports and exports, as well as supply and demand. Over the past few months, we've been dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. It's played a major role in demand destruction that has caused imports and exports to fall compared to previous years. It looked as though in August and September cases were seeming to be leveling off, but the end of restrictions has caused cases to rise again in October and November, and it indicates that we are in a second wave of COVID cases. This has renewed restrictions in many European countries and brought a general worry to possibilities of further demand destruction. One of the bright spots of the pandemic has been strong Chinese imports of cheap crude, which has certainly been able to prop up demand during the pandemic. And more recently, in the past couple weeks, we have seen positive vaccine news from both Moderna and from Pfizer, which seems to point that we could be possibly having an end to the COVID pandemic in the future. Over the course of the semester, we've also been keeping in line with the OPEC production cuts, which at the beginning of the semester, they were kind of beginning to rise, but as global cases for COVID started to rise, they have been able to stay in line with these quotas. More recently, we have seen Libyan crude production come back online as the blockade of their oil ports and oil fields has been lifted. So we're seeing a lot of barrels come out of Libya, and they're actually not within the production cuts set by OPEC. My next tab is my Outlook tab. On this left part, I've referenced the EIA Short-Term Energy Outlook Report. And then on this right part, I have the market outlook, which is basically a summary of what I believe the market outlook seems to be in the coming months, both short-term and long-term. As you can see, COVID has basically been the story that's been destroying demand, and the second wave has kind of brought a reinstatement of lockdown measures, social restrictions, and travel restrictions. But the positive news from the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine could bring an end to this pandemic, but that is still months away. I think it's important to look at Chinese demand for crude because I believe that could kind of play a story of what a post-COVID world could bring to the demand for crude oil. But with that being said, we are going to see a drop in demand for crude oil in 2020, which is down 9.3 million barrels a day when compared to 2019. On this next tab, I have U.S. Gulf Coast projects that could be coming online. On this next tab, I have U.S. Gulf Coast projects that are going to be coming online in the future. And then this next tab, I have an IMO 2020 blog from Argus. For my next tab, I have my pad tab where you can see the individual pad regions, the type of crude that they import, the country they import their crude from, the city that receives the crude, and also the processing facility that processes the crude. So if we go ahead and highlight pad 3 here, we can see that they get a lot of heavy sour crude, and they import a lot of crude from Mexico. So we're going to go ahead and highlight that. Highlight this, and then we can see that Houston receives a lot of crude. So if we highlight that, we can see the countries that also process the crude. For my next tab, I have the facility tab where we can see the importing country, the processing company of that crude, and also the various levels of quality of crude and the country where they're imported from. So if we highlight Canada, we can see that BP processes a lot of Canadian crude oil. My next tab is my country tab. Here we can see the importing country. So let's go ahead and highlight Saudi Arabia. As we can see, they export a lot of crude to pad 3, so we're going to go ahead and highlight that again. with a lot coming to Port Arthur. And then we can see that Motiva Enterprises processes a lot of Saudi Arabian crude. My next tab is the weekly imports to the U.S. As we can see that Canada exports a lot of crude to the U.S. My next tab is my Clipper Data Imports tab. Here we can see the API per offtake pad. So let's go ahead and highlight Freeport. We can see that they get a lot of heavy sour crude, so we're going to go ahead and highlight that. And we can see they get a lot of their heavy sour crude from Mexico. So say we wanted to see what came in March, we can go ahead and highlight that. And these are the vessels and the API grade that we can see right here. Then I just have a data table tab for my Clipper data. Then this is my Clipper data exports tab where we can see the API per offtake pad, a pie chart for the offtake pad percentage, and then the distribution of the offtake pads. For my next tab, I have the forward curves for, at the top here is WTI, Brent, and Houston WTI. As you can see, the markets are in contango right now, but it's not as steep as you would think, given the vaccine news that would put demand recovery off into the future. And then we have the various spreads right here. As we can see, the WTI Brent spread is nearing $3, especially as you move out into the later months. For my next two tabs, I just have web pages. The first one is the EIA company level imports tab, and then I have the EIA weekly imports and exports.